that are either highly advanced in computer science techniques and want to apply that on solving social problems, or people that are advanced in social sciences questions but want to explore computer science tools and especially fluid internet data in order to answer newer questions about human behavior and group behavior that were either non-existent before or were inexplicable before the onset of computational social science. So computational social science is a new scientific discipline that has its own journal, that has its own departments. I think sometimes people confuse computational social science with social data science. And so far, I haven't really heard of any convincing explanation that proves that these are different things. Most of the time, British call it social data science. Americans call it computational social science. And what you have basically, what's the difference between them? I'm not convinced that there's any difference. So that is that. This year, we had to do the Summer Institute online. Last year, we did this for the first time physically in person in Istanbul at Kadir Has University. This year, due to COVID, we have to migrate to Zoom. Migrating to the Zoom did take away some of the fun from the physical, like social interaction between participants. I'm very sad about that, but nonetheless, the primary purpose of this Summer Institute is actually get people interested in computational social science and get them to work on their projects and actually interact and work into group projects. We fulfilled that goal. So fun is not there as much as we had last year, but the main purpose is definitely there. And we had really talented people in this year's Computational Social Science Summer Institute. And so usually Summer Institute in Computational Social Science is a 2-week event. In the first week, people work on preset topics: text mining, text analysis, network analysis, scraping, harvesting, cleaning, social media data, basically building scraper algorithms, crawler algorithms. And in the second week, normally, they work on group projects. And today's presentation is based on these second week group projects. As the Istanbul site this year, we wanted to try something new. Actually, instead of this 2-week Summer Institute, we did a 4-week Summer Institute, a month of Summer Institute. So we added 2 extra weeks before the actual event because last year we discovered that when we just right away, start the Summer Institute, there are lots of coordination problems, there are lots of harmonization and compatibility problems. Some people who say that they are good programmers in their applications end up not being good programmers. So basically, in order to get rid of this discrepancy, we introduced an additional 2 weeks of pre-Summer Institute, where we basically trained them specifically in methods and key texts in computation social science. And based on what I saw this year, it worked beautifully. And in the coming years, we will definitely do this as a 4-week thing, a 2-week pre-Summer Institute session online, and then a 2-week actual Summer Institute, hopefully physically, next year. So this is basically what Computational Social Science Summer Institute is. And we have been getting quite good demand. People are actually, very happy with attending these Summer Institutes. So we'll be doing this next year as well. So those of you in the audience who may want to join next year, this would be a good idea in terms of, what is happening, what we do, what people are doing, so that you can start formulating your application for next year. And we'll be actually very happy to see some of you next year as well. So we have 35 people, which is good. Who is going first? I think we have the COVID economics working group right now.
Yes. So
Okay.
the first group is with economics. But before starting, we can give some words to Matti.
Oh yeah, Matti. Is Matti here? Oh, Matti.
Yes, of course I'm here.
Oh yeah, welcome.
Matti is always here.
Okay.
Let me just also turn my video on so that I'm here in a bit better way. So I think that I can really well articulated what's going on and what's the purpose of this. I would just also want to sort of highlight that the need for this kind of intensive programs to develop skills in more computational areas of social science research are increasingly or are increasing all over, and actually the job market situation even in academia is fairly good. So these kind of talents are now really needed to understand the digital society. And just to highlight on that, I think that it was Science who, or the magazine Science, where there was a story about the recent transformations on social sciences, also highlighting the camp of social scientists now learning programming, referring to the Summer Institute. So this is actually something that's also well recognized as an activity, and I think that could even serve as a model for quite many places to think how to do this in highly intensive manner. I really want to also emphasize that stuff that we've now got some hand on usually would take a few more months compared to what we've tried to do that, and I think that, or I hope that everyone understands that this is the first steps of the process, and learning continues after that. And we could even maybe try to, in the feedback email, Emre just remind me that I promised something like this, but really try to also provide the resources to continue learning these things and continue working on these topics, because the field is developing.
Cool.
Okay. So we can start the sessions, and the floor is yours.
Yes, so right now we have the presentation of COVID economics working group. Yeah, we can just straight up go to the working group. I think they can share screen and start by themselves.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so whoever wants to go first.
They all supposed to share their screen, and they all supposed to introduce themselves. And
okay.
Before starting the presentation, kindly introduce yourself, the group members.
Our group members there.
Oh, yes. Hello,
Hi.
everyone. Thank you for coming. We are the largest group of 6 this year, and we are 5, and this is our topic. We're going to talk about the economic policy discussions at a glance, and using textual analysis methods of economic news using different sources during the pre- and post-COVID periods. So, yes, I am Efe Başlar, and I'm an industrial engineer, but I'm interested in social science, computational social science in general, and that's why I enrolled in this workshop. And I think my group members can also introduce themselves.
Yes. Cansu. Saliha, Martin.
Okay, I can start. I'm Saliha Taşpınar. I'm a political science master's student in Sabancı University. And Yeah, it is all. Cansu.
Cansu, are you here?
Hello.
You're on.
Sorry, I forget to unmute. This is Cansu. I am doing PhD in economics at Ankara University.
Well, I'm
Okay.
Martin Chaga, and I'm economics student of, I'm a PhD student at the University of Buenos Aires, Argentina.
I'm Osman Zeki Gökçe. I'm an assistant professor of political science and international relations and in Istanbul Medford University. I'm interested in quantitative social science, and I'm new at computational social science here.
Then we can start, I think. Our project focused on policy discussions during COVID. As most of us know, COVID has significant consequences on economics, which may be even underestimated for now, actually. And besides, policymakers and economics usually discuss on ideal policy applications during crisis, mainly under fiscal and monetary categories. While fiscal policies are considered as Keynesian approach, monetary politics are offered mostly by monetarist and neoclassic tradition. And we want to trace these discussions and policy applications by analyzing and comparing economy news during pre and post-COVID periods. Now our colleague Salia will explain our data and collection methodology.
Hi. For this project, we use data collected from newspapers, and we use our web scraping packages to do this. Our focus was a 1-year period to analyze pre and post-COVID. And there are several challenges we faced during our data collection process. And the biggest challenge is that most of newspapers are behind paywalls. So we do not have access most of them. Also, there are no internationally recognized indices for newspapers. Therefore, we have to decide on newspapers by ourselves. Also, language is another limitation for us. We are able to look at only English, Spanish, and Portuguese news sources. And now Efe can present you our methodology and our analysis. Thank you.
Well, in general, we try to determine a set of words that can be classified under fiscal or monetary policy discussions. And to get that set of words, we applied a series of methods. And of course, we had to go first with a descriptive statistics approach, and you'll see our results in the next slide. So for example, we use word clouds, a structural topic modeling approach, and also dictionary-based text analysis to group the news sources that we have collected under fiscal or monetary, for example. And also we, as a bonus, for example, we have provided you with a sentiment analysis of our results. And as a result, to test whether there's a difference between after and before COVID periods, we applied a difference in difference regression model to our data. And here you can see the different sentiment analysis results from English and Spanish sources. While there is no detailed takeaway to be taken from these plots, but we can see that in general, the Spanish sources seem to be more positive compared to their English counterparts. But also it might be worth noting that after the World Health Organization declared COVID a pandemic at March 11th, the portion of negatively tinted news actually grew a bit. Especially on Spanish sources and English sources. And here you can see English, Portuguese, and Spanish word clouds. And you can see that we have focused on economics news and coronavirus related discussions. And here you can see that, and after actually classifying the news sources according to whether they are fiscal or monetary related, you can see that after COVID was declared a pandemic at the middle of March, you can see a slight increase in the discussions regarding fiscal policies. In general, there's a actually correlation between these fiscal and monetary discussions, but at the end, there's a slight difference after the pandemic was declared. And you can see that the previous chart was related to English news sources, and you can see the Spanish news sources here. And in English sources, the difference might be a bit more significant than those in the Spanish sources, but there is a difference nonetheless. And unfortunately, we don't have a complete data on Brazilian sources. There are some missing time periods in Brazilian data, but you can see again an increase, a surge perhaps in the number of news sources that deals with fiscal discussions. And here you can see our structural topic modeling results. And I'd like you to focus on the topics 5 and 12. And in general, I mean, there are lots of topics that are being talked about in the COVID and post-COVID and pre-COVID period. And they can be, for example, the Hong Kong protests or other sanctions regarding this recent Turkish incursion into Syria. But in general, especially the 12th topic here, you can see that these words are generally related to fiscal policies. And on the other hand, the 5th topic is generally related to monetary policies. And using some set of words that we have derived from the literature and also these analysis, and stemming also from the word clouds, we have defined a set of words, and we'll introduce them shortly. You can see here the Spanish sources, and I think Martin can give you a comment on these Spanish and Portuguese sources. Okay.
Yes, maybe, this is the structural topic model for Spanish sources. You have to trust me, but the topics 6 is related with policy, monetary policy, and maybe the topic 11 is associated with, I don't know, exchange rate market. Well, you have you can find the topic 13 related with COVID and supermarkets and food, and the fiscal policies related with the topic 15, for example. And if you pass to the other and the Portuguese sources, well, the labor markets are related with topic 3 and topic 6. The fiscal policies related with topic 15, and maybe the monetary policy is related with the topic 16.
So using these results, and like I said, and using some words from the literature, we have built a set of words for all of these languages, and for English, for Spanish, and Portuguese. And you can see that how often these words co-occurred in a contextual based text. You can see that there is a discrepancy between these categories. I mean, it might not be an absolute difference, but you can see them nonetheless. You can see these words here, and tinted in crimson, are related to fiscal policies, and on the other hand, the purple color words are related to monetary policies. So we believe that our choice of words here are justified just by looking at this chart. You can see that fiscal words generally appeared alongside the fiscal words. On the other hand, the monetary word generally appeared alongside monetary words. So we have run a difference and difference analysis on our data, and separately on English, Spanish, and Portuguese sources. And we have reached the conclusion that, according to these results, difference and difference effect was at least significant under these conditions, without any controlled variables that we were not able to introduce in the model. And you were able to see this in our time series plots of the fiscal and monetary categorization of our data. And yes, you can see here on the third row, DID, the difference in difference effect, which is significant. But on the other hand, the model itself is not that significant because we cannot control for the entire variation in the model, because there are so many factors that should be incorporated in the future, perhaps. And you can see here the Spanish and Portuguese results. And these are interesting, and perhaps Martin can give us some enlightenment on this regard.
Yes, the left table correspond to Argentina, and the right correspond to Brazil. So, well, there is the dip coefficient is not statistically significant, but you can see in both of cases, the fiscal, the variable FBM is a dummy variable that take the value 1 if the word correspond to fiscal policy. So you will see that in both of cases, the fiscal policy has an intercept bigger than the monetary policy. But in both of cases, the model explain a low proportion of the variability of the amount of words.
So, I mean, compared to English sources, Spanish and Portuguese sources, Argentine and Brazilian sources did not report us a significant effect caused by a difference and difference effect. But on the other hand, the count regarding the fiscal and monetary categories were still different, regardless of whether it is found in pre-COVID or post-COVID period. So for conclusion.
Okay, so I can handle this, I think. So thank you, Efe. So in this research, our aim was to investigate whether there is a change in economic policy discourse in news sources at the nexus of fiscal and monetary policies. We started our journey with textual analysis using global mainstream news sources, and our results suggest that there's a shift in favor of fiscal policies in news during post-COVID era. We also found country-specific differences, such as those between Argentina and Brazil, although these are not significant. And besides textual analysis, we also incorporate some causal inferential flavor to our analysis by employing differences and differences method. And the results indicate that pandemics significantly amplify fiscal-oriented policy discussions. And as you can see, our research needs some improvements also. So first, we focused mainly on English-based sources and also Portuguese and Spanish, thanks to Martin. Our news sources are mainly based on Western-oriented sources, and we need to expand our research in these two aspects. And finally, we might explore variation across countries having different economic structure or backgrounds, such as rentier states, how they would react to Corona in terms of which policy alternatives or choices. States with high social security coverages or low ones, or countries having specific or different pre-COVID economic situations. We should also explore during the further research on this topic. So I think that's all for us. Thank you.
Thank you from all of us for listening,
Great.
for being here. And
Perfect.
also we'd like to thank Emre, because
Yes.
it wouldn't have been possible without him. I mean, he even helped us greatly, even with our presentation. So, and also thanks to Akunoja and Monty for organizing this in times of COVID.
Very welcome. This is my pleasure.
Well, great. Can you go to the slide on your data collection? I think it was the second slide. Yeah, sample 1 year period. So what is the starting date of your?
So usually, if there was data available, we picked 1st of June, 2019. Yeah.
Yeah. But so you do have 1st of June 2019 in this data.
If it was available, yes.
So it's not it's not available.
I mean, some news sources do not go that far. Yeah.
Okay. So because I don't understand the part about so, for example, of course, Summer Institute isn't enough time to produce an actual paper. So all of these works are working papers, the beginning of working papers. It's just that I'm trying to understand, does your data also cover the period before COVID? Because in terms of generalizability, referees are going to ask you, you found these very cool and interesting findings, but how do they compare to non-COVID period? So that we can actually judge whether these are COVID-related differences or whether these things are just the way people have always been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the first thing, like before trying to compare it with other countries or with other languages. I think the first thing to be done after the Summer Institute is over, you take a week of break, just like go on a holiday, then return back, start working on this again when you want to. I think the first thing would be to start the data collection period to pre-COVID period, meaning that before February. You can do maybe 1 month before February or 2 months before February and start taking it from there. You say we want 1 year, but maybe that's not really necessary, because the main thing we need to do is the effect of COVID by every single year, every single month that we have COVID, on how these discussions are. So maybe when COVID first popped up in March, people talking about economics didn't take this very seriously, and you don't really have that much. But then April, people start to actually take it seriously. May, they actually start to talk about long-term economic planning, which gets reinforced. So what you need for this project is that kind of a story to tell through your data. Right now, this is perfect starting point, but I think in terms of understanding whether these observed effects are about actually COVID or whether these effects have been there all the time. So you do difference in difference. I think this research is an ideal candidate for regression discontinuity analysis because we have like a major threshold to actually test the causality between pre-COVID and post-COVID issues. So that will be my comment for this, but this is really great work. For those of you who want to ask questions to the panelists, at any given time, you can write those questions to our chat, and I'll be able to see those questions from chats, and I can ask them to the panelists. But Matti, do you have anything to add?
I think that this is not really my domain, so it's better or wiser not to say anything so you don't understand how stupid I am.
Oh, no, but I mean, here's the thing, like when these things in journals get sent to reviews, because since computational social science is a new field, it doesn't always get sent to an area specialist. So they can send it to a computational social science expert, which is you, Matti, basically. So I mean, if it's okay if you don't want to say anything, but I think it's important for people to get as many different comments as possible. But so Kyle is asking, what was the name of the plot you used to show the relationships between your two sets of words? Can you go back to that slide and explain it, please? I think.
Of course.
Yeah.
Now, this is called a chord diagram, and it can be found in the package Circlize on R. And of course, we will sharing our codes. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a wonderful graph. I mean, it can be used for many approaches. I mean, it can be used for network analysis or any graph for that matter. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking. It also shows that, yeah, like most topics seem proportionally related to each other, which is interesting. I mean, this chart itself is another paper, because this is about, you know, topic, maybe like this is topic distribution model. So interests, public interest, debts, interest, government. I think this is another paper. So what you guys actually have is basically two different papers to work on. Yeah. Any other questions?
Well, what I would really want the team to sort of reiterate and maybe dumb it down for me is that why is this study important? Why is it interesting for us? And then what's the connection with the empirical work that you've done and the results that you've shown to us? The sort of usual, and why, and I think that you might have heard this rant from me before, but this is really a common challenge with many computational social science papers, that the motivation might not be that clear, or that the connection between the what you aim to do and what you end up doing is not always that strong.
Yeah, the presenters. What is your main story? What's the story you want to tell?
I can add something maybe
Yeah.
on behalf of our group. Actually, economic issues mostly analyze with quantitative techniques mostly, most widely. Textual analysis is a fairly new issue, I think, for within the economic domain. And that's our first motivation. And also, since there is a big and important literature on fiscal and monetary discussions, we think that we can make use of this literature and try to do some new textual analysis and maybe start a new approach for economics.
Yeah, that is justified. It's just that journals, if you're shooting for good journals, they're going to look for a theoretical contribution. So, you know, trying to do computational social science on, you know, economics, the methodological contribution by itself, I think, would not be as widely accepted. So theoretically, so one of the things you can consider is, you know, pick a theory from economic psychology or behavioral economics. You know, do people talk about economics differently? It's really not my field, but I'm assuming there are there's probably a very large ocean of theories on how people talk about or how people perceive the economy during particular crisis periods. How do people's crisis decision making relate to their non-crisis decision making? And COVID is a crisis, so it gives us a chance to test the theory on whether perceptions and discourses on the economy change during health crises as well. So you need that kind of theoretical story to make it publishable in a very important journal. Those will be, I think, the most important things. Kamil Yilmaz asks, great presentation, thanks. I'm curious, however, why did you not compare Western and non-Western countries in the first place for this project, as you alluded to in the end? So, selection rationale. Why did you pick these countries or these languages? What does the selection rationale tell us about the theoretical question that we want to answer? I think this is a selection rationale question.
Osman can reply, or I can add just a couple of things. Actually, we had a great experience because when you encounter with data, you always, every time you need to reframe your question. We had some difficulties while collecting data and while scraping data and trying to extract relevant information from that data. I think this is the first reason why we have to limit our countries, and also we have so limited time. We did this just a few days actually, reframe and preparing this analysis, and we would like to further our investigation. We would like to collect new resources. For example, it's really difficult to filter a country-specific data from news outlets. For example, first we just think we can pick a reliable resource, for example, for Turkey, like Dünya Gazetesi or Bloomberg Turkey, and collect its economics news under the economics category segment. But even in that case, there are a lot of information and news about other countries, for example, related with USA or European Union countries as well. That's why then we realized that it's really difficult to separate countries, but maybe we can do this regional, and we also would like to do that. Thanks a lot for your comments.
Matti writes, for methodological contribution, you should choose a baseline or something like that, where you can compare this method to other methods. For example, of somewhat more methodological contribution, Matti has an article there. So in order to say that, the method that we are using is better compared to other methods, you need to establish a baseline from which you can compare that this method is better than other methods. So I think Matti, working the fields of big data, use the big data augmented online ethnography to study candidate-candidate interaction at election time. So this article can actually help you. So thank you, Matti, for pointing this out. It's just that, I know this is a working paper. It's just that everyone is giving a review as if it's submitted to a journal, because it's important to, get reviewer possible comments early on, so that since you're at the beginning of your study, you can really easily improve the study in lots and lots of ways. So, yeah. All right.
Sorry, one thing to add. I mean, this slide actually something happened to it, but it doesn't show properly the sources. So in general, Reuters was about 4,000, and the other that are not visible were about 2,000. So in general, we had like around 20,000 news text. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. So for the sake of giving everyone, equal time to present, thank you so much, guys, for doing this. This is really, interesting work, and I think if you work on it in the coming months, you can really publish this in a nice information technology and economics related paper. So thank you so much. So next up, we have the Turkish Twitter working group. Saadettin Demiral, Ezgi Kıbrıs, Tekin Baykız, and Insa Bonos. So you guys can start whenever you want.
Hi everyone. Maybe
Hello.
we can begin with introducing ourselves.
Yes, please.
My name is Saadettin, and I'm a PhD candidate in journalism at Istanbul University, and I am interested in quantitative and computational social science methods. Maybe my other mates also introduce themselves.
Yes. Think about you. Yeah. Hello.
We can hear you.
Hi, my name is Enes Abanos. I'm assistant professor at communication department on the Uzmais University in Samsun. So I'm working on the computational social science mainly, mostly like a big data and social media.
Hello, I'm SICSS-Istanbul. I am doing my PhD in University of Rochester. I'm also interested in fake news and Twitter. I can start presentation.
Sure.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So our presentation topic is typology of fact-checking organizations in Turkey. And here is our outline. We will first talk about introduction, then research questions, then a bit more about Turkish fact-checking organizations, methodology and data collection, then our findings, and we will conclude. Fact-checking can be defined as a process of investigating an issue or news article in order to verify the facts. First fact-checking website launched in 1995, it's snopes.com. Then fact-checking.org is launched in 2003. Especially after 2010, number of fact-checkers increased noticeably. And Turkey is also has many fact-checking organizations, and it's important in this slide that level of trust in news is just 55% according to Reuters digital news report. So that could be a reason that we have many fact-checking organizations. And one of the fact-checking organization is TAIT. TAIT means confirmation in English. It started in 2016. It's one of the signatories of International Fact-Checking Network, and it defines itself as a verification platform that scans, chooses, investigates suspicious information and delivers them to the readers by turning them into analysis. Another one is Doğruluk Payı. It's Share of Truth, found in 2014, and it's also a signatory of International Fact-Checking Network. And other one is Yalan Savar. It's actually the first fact-checking organization in Turkey, and it's defined itself as a science lover. And the other one is Evrimacı. It's Tree of Evolution, founded by Çağrı Mert Bakırcı, and it is the largest popular science organization. It calls itself like that. Günün Yalanları, it's a project of Bosphorus Global, and they called themselves as we are investigating corrections of news and claims in domestic media. And lastly, Malumat Furuş, it's a Persian word, means pedantic. It falsifies columnists and who notices their mistakes, and it mostly focuses on newspaper columnists' claims. And our research question is which topics are verified by fact-checking organizations in Turkey? How are the fact-check topics differentiated among these organizations? And we have 63,000 tweets from these 6 fact-checking organizations. We get these tweets with Twitter API, and we use quantitative text analysis, network analysis, and structural topic models in our presentation. Here is some descriptive statistics, and what we can see from here, as every Maci has most number of followers, and also Teyit is very popular, and most number of tweets, Dorulpay has the most number of tweets, and Yalan Savar is the oldest one, as you can see here. And also when I put them for popularity measure, but Teyit has most popular tweets according to this table. And this is fact-checking accounts activity, and there is an increase recently. As you can see, this is every Maci's activity. I guess this can be a result of coronavirus. Maybe in the literature, some authors say that during times of uncertainties, use of fact-checking increase, so maybe having coronavirus caused this peaks in the user activity. So I think Saadettin can continue.
Yeah, I will continue. Should I share my screen?
Okay,
yeah.
I can stop.
Can you just?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. I hope my screen is okay now. Can everyone see the presentation?
I can see your screen, but not presentation.
You cannot see my presentation now?
Now I can see it, yes.
Okay. In findings, actually, we did a textual analysis of the tweets to see which topics actually mostly frequently used by these fact-checking organizations. So when we see, actually, we did, first of all, n-grams, we did bigrams and also trigrams of the tweets. We actually find 1 word and the 2 word and 3 words of most frequent words in their tweets. And in our first actually analysis, we see Teyit use mainly true, photo, false, video, fake news, and COVID terms, which is it's very normal because Teyit is mainly verify suspicious claims and fake news, and mainly they are working on photo or video of news to verify. When we see doğruluk payı, mainly actually we wouldn't see here, but they are actually toward more political fact checking. Actually, they use mainly Turkey, country, and mostly economic terms like average and proportion, which we'll see later in presentation. And these words mainly most frequent used words, but maybe we can't see a clear picture here because we need more contextualization. But what is important here, I think, günün yalanları account is use lies as a most frequent words. I think this is this shows less professionalism because most of the fact-checking organizations here do not use lies or do not use these accurate terms to these on the verified topics, because they mainly say, for example, doğruluk payı say that share of truth is very weak in these claims, not they do not use the lies term here. So what we see here is a bit in the case of günün yalanları is a bit less professionalist use of words, we can say. Also in Evrim Ağacı and Yalansavar, we see some actually common words. I think they are really, I mean, they work related to scientific fact-checking here. Let's get more context here, because in bigrams, we see mainly Dorluk payı use political figures and political parties in most frequent words here. And also in Malumat Furuş, we see columnist names like Ahmet Hakan, for example, Soner Yalçın. My Turkish friends would actually recognize them easily. Also, as you see, columnist also most frequent words in Malumat Furuş. So another important findings in the bigram words, also in Evrim Ağacı and Yalansavar, which is, it shows that these fact-checking organizations mainly verify scientific matters. I mean, in Evrim Ağacı, you can see natural selection, artificial intelligence. I mean, it's in Turkish, but I am trying to translate what they actually mainly use most frequently. Scientific analysis. I mean, in Yalansavar, we see similar terms. So what we see here, we see a clear category actually. I mean, in the trigrams graphics, also we see some similar findings regarding, for example, Evrim Ağacı and Yalansavar has the similar focus here, because they are more of a toward their work related to scientific fact-checking. Dorluk payı use more of a political terms. They are their work related to the political fact-checking. Malumat Furuş again used mainly work on columnists. And Teyit and Günün Yalanları ise Teyit and Günün Yalanları is mainly works on news, suspicious claims, and false claims, etc. So what we did here, we get some context regarding what they use frequently. Secondly, we use TF-IDF analysis of tweets. Actually, in this analysis, we see the words that belongs to these organizations. I mean, what I mean here is, for example, in Dorluk payı, in here, claim, beyanat, is only used by Dorluk payı here. I mean, TF-IDF analysis shows the original unique words to that group. So what we see here, what we actually get here with these findings also supports our claim, because when we look at actually Evrim Ağacı and Yalansavar, we see some scientific words, scientific vocabulary they use frequently. Again, Dorluk payı is used government matter, and member of parliaments, Ahmet Davutoğlu, a former president of Turkey, I mean, they use these terms frequently. Again, in Teyit and Günün Yalanları, we see some suspicious claims and also, I mean, fake news terms. As I said earlier, we actually categorize these fact-checking organizations with these findings. One, political claims, and also Teyit and Günün Yalanları works on suspicious claims and fake news. Malumat Furuş verify columnists, and Evrim Ağacı and Yalansavar explain and verify scientific issues. So in this categorization, we also we tried to find their most used hashtags and most used top mentioned, I mean, most top mentioned users to contextualize a bit their areas or their working areas. In Dorluk payı, you can see easily they mainly...
You speed up some because the time limitation.
Okay. Okay, in doğruluk payı, as you see, it's political parties and political figures. And also in their network, mainly, they are actually mentioning about political figures and political parties. In Malumat Furuş, we see again columnist and Treaty of Lausanne, etc. These terms, and they are also mentioning mainly mention journalist and columnist. In Evrim Ağacı and Yalan Savar, we see again scientific matters, which these findings supports our categorizations regarding the fact-checking organizations. What we get from Tate is actually a bit less, because their data, I mean, they do not use they do not use a lot of hashtags. So, but we get some urban legends and HARP, coronavirus facts. These are the mainly fake news terms, etc. So the special case here is the Günün Yalanları, because these fact-checking organizations mainly active in tags related to government agenda, and density of tags network is related to military operation in Syria. And there are activists that ties opposition parties with terror organizations or groups, as you can see in networks. Also, in their top mentions users, most mentions users in their tweets belongs to opposition politicians and newspapers of portals that are critical of government, or news sites that branches of foreign agencies. So we can say that actually here, along with textual findings, these networks show deliberately, these networks target some groups and actually show some pro-government tendencies. So my friend Enes will continue from here.
So I think we don't have any time left to continue because presentations are supposed to be 10 minutes maximum. So we have to actually move on to another event right after this. So we have to finish this by 4 p.m.
Maybe we can conclude the conclusion and we can finish if you
because
in 1 minute or
okay, because presentations are supposed to be 10 minutes maximum. That's how we arrange the whole presentation session. So if you can wrap up in only 1 minute, because we have to move on quickly.
Okay, so sorry about the time. We also did some account network and also structured modeling. In conclusion, actually, we can say that fact-checking ecosystem in Turkey is diverse and fragmented. And with these findings from these methods, we can actually classify these fact-checking organizations for different categories. And as you can see in the presentation, also fact-checking actually used for supporting pro-government activities, as in the case of Günün Yalanları. And lastly, actually, we use the computational social science method to map the fact-checking ecosystem in Turkey. Sorry about time.
I'm going to tell my comments about this later, because right now we really have to move on to the next presentation. But if people have questions for this presentation specifically, write into the chat session. I will then email it to the participants along with my personal comments to them. So let's move on to the third presentation, which is Twitter sphere during the pandemic, public opinion change by Burak Özturan and Betül Özturan. And please keep it at 10 minutes because I think we already stretched too long.
Hello.
Hello.
I am Betül. I will just briefly introduce myself while Burak is opening the presentation. I am studying political science at the University of Constance. I am in my last year of master's studies. And normally I am interested in terrorism, civil wars, and UN, but I wanted to have some methods background on computation. So that's why I have attended the Summer Institute. And luckily I have some knowledge now about web scraping and text analysis and several other issues that we will talk about during our presentation.
Can the presentation is seen now?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
we can.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Burak. I'm doing Social and Economic Data Science Master in University of Constance. And yeah, Betul will just start our presentation and I will go on later.
Our project is about public opinion change, and we will be presenting as follows. First, we will introduce you our research question and how we have collected our data. And we have several different methods. We will introduce them. And we will also talk about some obstacles we have faced, and we will talk about how a future research can be done about this, about our project. Burak, can you go to the next slide? Maybe. We have 3 different research questions. The first one is, how does public opinion evolve over time during pandemic? And the second one is, what is the role of bots in debate of COVID-19? The reason why we have asked the second and third question is to understand public opinion better, because we think that bots and news agencies react differently than the real people, which tweets actually in Twitter. So we want to differentiate them and have a more reliable answer to public opinion change. And Burak will present the data set and the method that he has used. Burak, are you there?
Yes, sorry, my microphone was off. So sorry for that. Yeah, we have collected tweets, about 4.5 million tweets in total, and then how can we collect the tweets? We have just select 6 themes, which is COVID-19, politics, economy, religion, foreign countries, and disinformation. And then we select our time interval before and after 1 month period, before and after 1 month of the official outbreak in Turkey. And then this is some preliminary, some brief graph about our tweets. We see that the daily tweets about which are mentioning some of the COVID variations, and then we see that after the first instances in Iran, there is some upward trend, and then after the first official outbreak, we see that we reach our peak here, and then later on we see that there is some downward slope, downward trend here, and then there is some upward sloping here, which should be, I think, qualitatively analyze what's happened there. But yes, this is so far we have. And how we collect our data? First, we made some random Twitter search, how people use some words about the coronavirus or any other economic or political thematic issues. And then I used Amazon Web Services to collect our data, because it takes too much time to use your own computer. And then I merged the tweets corresponding to specific themes with the keywords via Google on the Drive using Google Colab. And then I just made some data preprocessing, which is compatible with some NLP pipelines, alphanumeric characters, lowercasing, and then we just eliminate the stop words. And then for the analysis, we used word cloud and topic modeling. And yeah, here are our before and after results. For the economy team, I think the people were talking about some financial crisis, maybe some dollar increase suddenly, and then some unemployment here, which SICSS means unemployment in Turkish. And then later on, mainly the economic concern is about the lockdown, which is sokak yasa in Turkish. And for the domestic politics, again, we see that the mülteci means refugee, and then there are some mültecis were on this Greek border in that before time, and then later on we see that the focus changed to do some health science committee, let's say, due to COVID, of course. And for the foreign politics, we see that the focus was about the Russia, Syria, and Turkey, which we have a hot conflict between Russia and Syrian borders. And then later on, we see that the most worst is about some Albania, Germany, and Italy,
which the Turkey's somehow European neighbors, let's say, about their COVID instances. And then now I will show my topic modeling. Due to the some RAM limitation, I cannot do it for the I couldn't do it for all of the coronaviruses, but let's say for now I can give you a glimpse. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Hello. Okay. For the economic thing, I did that LDA, and then as we just see from the word cloud, in the biggest topic is about the consequences of the war, Turkish intervention in Syria, and then we have here the dollar foreign currency crisis, let's say, and then for the second topic we have tourism crisis, which because I think that tourism is very important sector for the Turkish economy. We couldn't do it for all of the teams we have because the LDA use so much RAM, and unfortunately we are not, we don't have that RAMs in general. And we thought that detecting bots in the Twitter, how they change the public opinion, what are their roles on the public opinion change is also important. So from now on, Betül will present you to what can be done to detect the bots in the Twitter.
Okay, so for the sake of keeping with time, the 10 minutes is up. So if you could wrap it up quickly, please.
Are you sure that I think it is like 6 or 7 minutes only?
We started 2 past, I think. Emre, do you hold time? You're muted.
A couple of minutes. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. We will use Botometer for detection of bots, and it is a system developed by Dr. Varol, and it checks the activity of Twitter accounts and gives you some scores about this. And we will use universal scores because our data set is in Turkish, and I will show you some descriptive statistics. Burak, can you go to the next slide? Here you can see that the top Twitter accounts are news agencies. So that's why we have thought that it will be a good idea to exclude them to understand the real public opinion change. Can you go to the next one? And here we have the bot scores. Higher means they are more likely to be a bot, and almost like 10% of the total accounts these are from samples. These are not from the total data set. We have sampled them for the sake of time. And here you can see that 10% of all of the users are likely to be bots, and we want to exclude them to understand the real public opinion change. And we have 3 further steps. First, we will finish the identification for the whole data set, and the second step is network, and the last step is sentiment analysis, which Burak has told before. We will apply the same method to 3 different data sets for bots, news agencies, and real users. And for the networks, we will use hashtags, retweet, and mentions. And as you can see from the sample from like a picture of the data sets, we have these informations from Twitter. And we will talk about the issues and the future research the issues that we have faced and the future research, and Burak will talk about them.
Yeah, for the time we have don't enough time. It's just we talk about some issues we have, and then we can talk about maybe then with the Q&A sessions. And then as a wrap up, this is the first comprehensive data set about the Turkish TVs during the pandemic time. And then our research tries to combine the user profiles and TV contents to analyze the public opinion change with and without bots in the later studies. And thanks all of the technical assistance of Dr. Matti and Ahmed, and research supervision of the Akın Ünver Hocas, and then Professor Onur Varol and Matti Nelimarke again, and about everything for the Emre. And thanks for all of you, our SICSS-Istanbul team. Thank you.
This is great. This can be converted into a paper in various ways. Again, the most important thing that I think, Burak, we talked this with you previously several times. You have really a very large data set. and both of you, both Bertrand and Burak, you guys know how to work. But what's the theoretical question you're trying to answer with this very big data set? Because again, if you send it to a good journal, just saying that I have this big data set and look how cool I processed this isn't enough to get them published in good journals. Good journals will always ask you, what's the theoretical literature you're trying to contribute? So some of the things that I would suggest linking this to would be, it could be the agenda setting literature, basically based on what agenda setting moves either by the government or media companies. Do people talk about COVID? So is there any relationship between the kind of information that people consume and the information that they spurt out? Yeah, Mahdi's line about our time constraint. So agenda setting literature would be one literature that I would link this to. The other one would be information seeking literature. Basically, if you're trying to look for information seeking and political behavior, or information seeking and social behavior. So the link between the type of information that people consume and the type of behavior that you are trying to measure in this context. So still, when you apply, this is how people talk about in social media, reviewers are going to basically ask you very predictable questions. So why should I care about why people talk about on social media? What is the dependent variable that I'm looking?
And that, yeah, in this regard, this might be some research question. For example, does bolts increase the polarization? Or maybe if we can identify the bolts and then look at the polarization measurements once we exclude the bolts, and then with the inclusion of there, if we see that there is quite a difference, and then if we can conclude somehow there is effect or there is not effect, it would be a question in that as a scientific research question.
And in general, does COVID increase polarization online is a perfectly legitimate, good question. So what happens during health crises? Do people get polarized more politically, or does polarization actually decrease? But then you need another comparison study, a pre-COVID comparison marker, so that you'll be able to say that I observe this much polarization during COVID, and in relation to this other thing that I'm looking at, I see big or small polarization. So that's also a very legitimate working question.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I don't see any questions. If you have any questions, feel free to write to the chat. We are jumping onto the next presentation, Twitter Arabic, examining online radical discourse in civil war context, the case of Salabi Mahbadai's discourse in the Libyan civil war on Twitter.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, great, Leo. I think we need to share our screen. Meanwhile, I will introduce myself. So my name is Bilal. I'm doing a PhD in International Relations, Political Science. Burak, sorry, yeah. So my name is Bilal. I'm doing PhD at the Graduate Institute in Geneva, working in International Relations and Political Science program. And in the meantime, I'm also doing research. I'm researcher at the CCDB, which is Center for Security, Development and Peace Building at the same institute. And Leo, please, if you can introduce yourself.
Yes, absolutely. So, hi, I'm Leo. I'm a second-year MA student at Goethe University Frankfurt in International Relations and Conflict Studies. And I'm trying to set up the presentation. It says Leo.
Yeah, okay, so no worries. Meanwhile, so Leo is from Frankfurt University, which is famous of being the birthplace of critical theory, and also my supervisor is working in critical security studies. So we had to face many challenges to come to these computational social science, quote unquote. I think
Yeah,
yeah.
It has a problem with loading the presentation. I'm very sorry. I'll try again. So here we go.
Okay, great. So our project was about examining the online radical discourse in the context of civil war, in the case of Libyan Salafi Madkhalis on Twitter. And the research question that we had in mind when we started this project were actually two research questions. Leo, if you can change, yeah. The first one is, how does the Madkhalis frame their political support, and what does that tell us about political legitimacy in a civil war context? And the second question was about how the Madkhalis framed and described their opponents, and what does that tell us about radicalization discourse in a civil war and possible de-radicalization programs. And why it was important for us, you can see in the slide, by the way, a map which is showing where the Madkhalis armed groups or affiliated armed groups are acting in Libya. You can see it's very interesting that they are founded in both eastern part of Libya under Haftar's control or under the Tripoli GNA governments in Western Libya, as well as in the south, which is interesting to see. And this is why one of the most important reasons to study this group, that it has no official outlook and a lot of speculations about this group in the literature and policy circles. And its followers also existed in the both fighting camps. So there is a network that needs to be uncovered. It's important, the Salafi Madkhalis as group is important violent actor of the Libyan civil war. So the results and findings will be important for what we call DDR, or disarmament, disintegration, and reintegration, DDR program. And also the followers of group are accused of spreading radical discourse online. So it's important for CVE, counter-violent extremism program, and also affiliated programs such as PVE as well. And the group is accused to have affiliation with regional states, Saudi Arabia namely. So it's important to understand the regional dimension of the conflict. And also it's accused of diffusing authoritarian narrative by advocating non-democratic blind obedience political agenda. And the finding then could be contribution to political legitimacy, norm diffusion, norm authoritarianism diffusion, and related issues. And Leo, now proceeding.
Yes, so I will walk you through the process right quick. So we started off because we didn't know anything about this group, basically. So we started off with Bilal doing interviews to find potential accounts and keywords associated with this group. And then secondly, we proceeded to research accounts online, basically, and increase the sample with snowballing. And the sample was kind of stratified because, as you could see on the map, the Madkhalis are embedded in both the LNA and the GNA side of the conflict, so on both sides. And they also run their own militias. So you basically have an interesting perspective just because they're on both sides, how they frame the legitimacy and radicalization. So the sample includes both. We scrape the tweets. So basically we just use the normal account scraping function via the API. So you retrieve the last 3,200 tweets per account. In the future, we plan on expanding that by using Twent, for example, for Python to scrape like whole accounts, tweets. We cleaned the data, and then came the breakdowns because doing stuff in Arabic is just extremely hard, either in R or in Python. You do have to do many workarounds. There are a ton of failures because just the most basic packages that you rely on, they don't really work with Arabic. So also this presentation is then a little bit more about how we dealt with these problems and showing some preliminary results. So basically what we did up until this point is doing word counts for single terms like frequency counts for bigrams and trigrams. We lemmatized words. We did word counts with lemmas. We tried word clouds, we're gonna get to that. And we tried TF-IDF. So let me walk you through it right quickly. So here you can see unigrams and keywords, kind of a comparison, and you can see that the lemmatized unigrams are much more frequent because, of course, they have been reduced to the basic form. And however, they're much more generic than the keywords. Bilal, do you want to say?
One little thing, the majority of our group and listeners don't speak Arabic, so if you could also walk us through these words a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. We will do so that because we
Okay.
need to have time to translate all things. So in the red graph, the red color, you can see very general like God, Allah, Libya, something like that. And of course, Tripoli and Benghazi is very much salient as two words which is reflecting the polarized nature of the conflict itself. But when we go more in details or less frequent word, we started to see words I will translate on the green one from up down, Al-Imam, which is referred to some religious authority, Syrian, reflecting the point that there is Syrian missionaries are fighting now in Libya. Allama is another also respected way to speak about the Rabi al-Madkhali, who is the leader of the group itself. You see after that Murtazaqa, which means missionaries. And later on, you see the name of Rada, which is one of the most important affiliated Madkhali group in Tripoli. And then Madkhali is the name of the leader itself, who is based in Saudi Arabia, which is important as the religious figure. It shows this, let's say, transnational connection between this group and the authority of the religious authority of the group in Saudi Arabia. And the last three words, it's interesting because we see now more frequent usage of the word like Khawarij, which means in Turkish Khariji, which used just to legitimize acting violently against the opponents, as well as accusing the Tripoli government of being Ikhwani, which means following the brotherhoods, which is, according to this group, is legitimate reason to target them. And Leo, yeah, the failed.
And this, what we can see here, is the occasional failure that you will walk into when you try to do word close, for example. So on the left side, this is what I tried. It doesn't work in any way in Python. On the right side, in R, it works somehow. However, it only displays single characters and not the words, the connected characters, which is, it's not equally bad, but it's still not sufficient for like a real presentation. So let's get to workarounds. So these were like dominating among our workflow, is to just try to get certain problems. First, you need to encode in UTF-8 to do meaningful analysis with Arabic characters. You need to use the Arabic reshaper, so to not run into the problem here on the right side, so that actual words, the characters are connected for plots, for example, for matplotlib. Yeah, you need to have a decent stop word list, which NLTK doesn't provide. So you need to download it and you need to convert it to a set to be used as stop words. Stemming with NLTK is pretty much a disaster because it just cuts off the last part of the word and it doesn't convert it to its root. Yeah, you can use a couple packages that are online for lemmatization or diacritization, so removing the little ligatures in Arabic. I use Parasa API, which works just fine. Stanza package wouldn't work on my Python. And also in sklearn, when I tried the TF-IDF, when we tried that, there is no stop word list for Arabic, so you just have to append the English stop word list with Arabic terms and then just retry the thing. So it really is playing lots of tricks. Also, sometimes just playing tricks on an algorithm. So basically, these are then the trigrams that we found after removing stop words and after removing lemmas. And they show a little bit more. Maybe Bilal?
Yeah, here again, we need to clean the data. Yeah, here apparently we need to clean the data more because still we have very general greetings on something, general phrases. But we, after these trigrams, we started to see that more of these Madkhalis concepts are started to pump up. And this is also in line with the interviews that we had before. So we also listed kind of most Madkhali use the phrase for radicalization, for example. So we started to see more referring to the High Committee of Fatwa, which is in the East Libya. And also it's important that we started to see more mentioning of Haftar's militias or self-styled army as being Libyan Arab armed forces, which is important in the legitimization discussion in Libya between the two camps. And by the way, it's interesting also here, and it's expected, by the way, that Corona issues started to be pumping up also in the last few.
Yeah. And so, like, as a last thing, that's what I tried to get into, or what we tried to get into yesterday, is a TF-IDF. So we just use a little sample of the whole set of tweets, which was 30,000. So we use a 3,000 words tweet sample from RADA, which is maybe the main Madkhali militia. It's aligned with the Tripoli government, and it has an official Twitter account apparently, or semi-official, but we think it's official. And so basically what I tried with sklearn is to come up with TF and IDF matrices. And here in this little plot, you can just see like the co-occurrence of the two most salient words in the IDF matrix for the RADA Twitter account, which is basically the group's name in Arabic. I translated it to English because I couldn't do Arabic labels for that plot. And so it's especially transports and God. So these are pretty generic terms. We also tried clustering, which didn't work well with sklearn. Apparently, the algorithm was good at just clunking, like putting together religious terms, but nothing else really. So we really have to work on that to maybe improve the clustering, and then we could also try to do classification as well.
Leo, sorry for interrupting. You are out of time. Can you wrap up in a few sentences?
Yes, this is the last slide.
So we are finishing. We're just saying that the outcomes confirm the polarized nature of Libyan civil war between Tripoli and Benghazi, and also underline the salient presence of religious discourse as manipulated motivation in both camps, and mainly among the Madkhalis, which is interesting to see how they are fighting on the two camps. And also the findings highlight the role that Madkhalis discourse play in radicalizing the conflict and the norm within the conflict, through describing their opponent as Khawarij to legitimize their killing or being violent against them. And also it's point to the increasing presence of Turkey-related discussion on the social media in Libya and among the Madkhalis accounts, which is of course reflecting the increasing Turkish intervention in Libya. These things of course need to be examined in details more.
And the last part is the next steps, is that we want to find more accounts, because we need more accounts that we can be sure of that they are Madkhalis. With some we weren't really. We also want to try dictionary-based text analysis, because by now from the interviews we have phrases and keywords that can be specifically tied to Madkhali discourse. So doing analysis with a dictionary is kind of promising. Topic modeling and extensive TF-IDF, that's also saved for later, because we first have to get behind how to improve the TF-IDF, the classification thing in general. And then also social and text network analysis is on our list. So thanks for listening.
Great. Well, this was really fascinating. I really like this, and I think it has a really high likelihood of building up into a very good journal article. I think it depends on what you want to do eventually, but for the sake of saving time, I'll just really make a very quick comment. If you're okay with like a mid-line journal, then this is fine. Madkhalis is really important. It's very understudied. Libyan civil war and radicalization, especially on radicalization, very understudied. So you have a huge potential of writing something very new out of this. If you want to try high-tier journals, you need dependent variables. So there is polarization, there's extremism, yes, but in every single war we have polarization and extremism. One, how does this differ to other types of radicalization and extremism we know in other civil wars? Two, if you can find dependent variables, maybe radicalization and foreign government involvement, like Turkish government or French involvement, for example, if you can find some kind of causal relationship, or radicalization, extremism, and the likelihood of that group to recruit more, for example. These are very important dependent variables that high journals are very, would be very interested in. But that's basically my comment. Matti says, to save time, again, for the presentation, I'm a bit puzzled about the various results and methods in the presentation, as usual. I think the findings slide has nicer narrative, and really working on that would be nice. If you still want to use dictionary-based text analysis, oh, wait, this is new. Some comments: be careful with your pre-processing choices. Profound effects on the results of models. Also relying on keywords can bring bias. Finally, there are major limitations of dictionary-based methods. If you still want to use dictionary-based text analysis, you should build up dictionary-based on your own corpus. You can assess these things further on as you work this article, but it's important to just like copy paste these comments in your own notepad so that you can think about them later on.
I will share all the comments after the presentation.
Yeah. But fascinating research. Like, I really would want to hear more about how this goes. Maybe something I'd want to know, as I'm not an international relations expert, why is studying social media a good data set for this kinds of analysis? This is, I think, such a big topic.
I can jump in here if you allow me.
Yeah, sure.
Well, before coming here last year, it was 1 or 2 years project I worked in as assistant for the project regarding CVE, which counter-violent extremism in Libya. And while trying to modeling a program for counter-violent extremism, we faced a problem of showing the radicalization patterns and discourse in online media, which is very important, and it was a gap in the research design and the research finding as well. So coming from that, I thought that it would be very interesting to have this thing. It will not have also academic contribution, but I think in policy research would be very interesting for them to see the result of these things.
Yeah, fascinating. Well, this is really interesting. So I would really suggest you to build this up into an article. It has a lot of potential. Let's move on to the next presentation. What's the next presentation? Analyzing COVID-19 in Moroccan newspapers. Let's move on to that.
Iman, Ibtisam.
Yes, hi everyone. I will wait for Ibtisam to share the presentation on screen.
You can introduce yourselves during the setup.
Okay, so I am Iman Khouja. I am a PhD student in data science here in Morocco, and Ibtisam Maqdoun.
Ibtisam?
You're on mute.
Hi. So I am Ibtisam Maqdoun. I'm a PhD student in computer science in Mohammed V University in Morocco.
So today we will present analysis of newspapers during COVID in Morocco. What is the motivation behind it? As you know, coronavirus is a worldwide pandemic with 200 countries that were affected and more than 9 million cases and approximately 500,000 of deaths. So several countries suffered from coronavirus effects such as China, Italy, Iran, and we wanted to see how did Moroccan entities reacted to this pandemic. So the data collection that we analyzed was news articles found in French news portals and also English news portals, and we used some keywords such as COVID-19 or coronavirus to scrap these news articles. So what we used in our methodology, first, after collecting the newspapers, we identified the entities and sentiments, and then we used the social network analysis to see the relationship between entities, and also we used some topic modeling, LDR for French newspapers and STM for English newspapers, and also we measured the sentiment polarity and did some coloration analysis. So now I will move to Ibtisam and let her present her results.
So the first thing we see here is a network of documents and entities related to each document. So documents are in the dark blue, and there is location, organization, and person. So as we see, there is so many entities that are included in fighting and defeating coronavirus in Morocco. If we look into the graph about co-occurrences of these entities, we find that there is a little cluster of entities inside, but there are so many who are like isolated from the news articles who are mentioned alone. And we also see that many organizations are involved in fighting coronavirus. So here we see a co-occurrence of organization in network. There is like small links such as between Samir, which is an organization in Morocco, and the Ministry of Energy, UNICEF, and the Mohammed Sank University, and the UNESCO World Digital Library. So here we might think that there is a lot of entities that are involved in coronavirus matters, but probably there is no collaboration between them, and each one of them is focused on one problem and trying to defeat one problem itself. Also for persons co-occurrences, we see that there is small links between Donald Trump and Monsef Slawi, also Rita Wilson and Tom Hanks. We also did the topic modeling for English newspapers. So we determined the seven topics. The first one is about coronavirus news. The second one is education. The third one is about economic crisis. The fourth one is about the international effect of coronavirus. Fifth one is about Islam. Sixth one is about the measurement taken by Morocco and the new laws and the security during the coronavirus period. And finally, there's the health topic, which like include the masks and the lockdown, the several things. So here we try to see like some titles from each topic. For example, for topic 2, we see that they mainly talk about remote lessons. So SICSS-Istanbul is an organization that shows some statistical about in Morocco. So they try to see the effect of remote lessons in Morocco, and also the Ministry of Education tried to evaluate remote learning. For the topic 3, we see that the economic effect of coronavirus in Morocco. So we see that the economic growth has slowed since the coronavirus. For the topic 4, we see the measurement taken by our country for the return of Moroccans outside Morocco. And for the topic 7, which is about health, we see that for example, Ministry of Health tried to distribute chloroquine to patients, and there's that authorities trying to save homeless people. So I will leave the French result to Iman.
So also I applied LDA on the newspapers, and I had some interesting 5 topics here. Like we can see that topic 1 is about economic crisis, topic 2 about health and COVID, and topic 3 about measures to counter COVID, also emergency state measures, and some COVID statistics. Sam, can you move to the, yeah. So here we have a network about shared topics between entities. And we can see that, for example, for topic 1 and 3, we can see that we have companies that help it in financially or providing hand gel mask during the coronavirus pandemic. In topic 4, we can see the companies that were active during the corona pandemic. And also in topic 5, we can see that only the Ministry of Health was reporting the statistics about corona and no other entity. So here we measure the sentiment for each newspaper article, and we try to see if there is some relationship between the reported deaths of corona. And we can see that when we use the correlation between the two, we can see that we have minus 0.1. However, when we use the lagged sentiment polarity of news articles with the number of deaths, we see that we have a bigger correlation between the two.
So to conclude, we did an analysis to detect entities involved in the coronavirus pandemic in Morocco. We detected several entities that was trying to encounter coronavirus. We know that our King Mohammed VI was the most mentioned entity, and we found that there are several ministries which were involved also, such as the Ministry of Health, Education, and Interior. We find that some companies were trying to also collaborate on this matter, such as Yanan One, Maroc Telecom, and Banque Populaire. We also found some universities, such as International University of Rabat and Mohammed VI Polytechnical University. So several precautions were taken by Morocco from our newspaper, detected from our newspaper, such as remote learning, corona pandemic funding, and closing borders with other countries, also producing face mask and hand gel locally. So the benefits from this summer school were that we learned so many things from courses and projects. We also learned through teamwork and meeting other researchers from other areas. We also got to work with new packages we didn't know about, such as text, such as STM, for example. And that's like the end of our presentation. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is very interesting. Mati, do you want to go now in terms of? No, yeah.
Just to summarize some of more generic notes actually to all groups, and first one relates to the excellent observation that the pre-processing and all kind of stuff that you do with data before you analyze data impacts the result. That's exactly true. And I think that that's one of the reasons why me and Akim are so deeply looking at why are you doing something and what's your contribution, because ideally, some of those answers might also impact on how you do your pre-processing or what kind of choices you make during the pre-processing process or in the methodological choices, and really sort of think that way through, and that is really important, and try to understand that a bit deeper. And I think that at the moment we are still in this kind of weird, I've been calling it Wild West era where we don't really know. So for example, if you do a regression analysis in political sciences, there is only one way of doing a regression analysis. And if you do something else, you will be looked quite explicitly that does this actually make sense, even in the level that we use bad practices, because those bad practices have been institutionalized into how we do research. And everyone knows that they are bad practices, like the p-value 0.005 0.05. Well, the 5% margin. That is one bad practice to have that kind of highlight, but it's been institutionalized, and that's really interesting. And yes, that is one of the interesting texts about the pre-processing choices. There's also similar kind of text, and I'll share it on the communication, which is done in natural language side. So they've also done some work on this. So, but I think that it would be nice, or I do believe that in long term we start to learn how to do these things based on more on the theoretical perspectives. And then the other thing I'm also ranting about is that quite often you see computational social science papers where it's clear that they've been dropping different kind of bits of the analysis in there, and then it creates some picture of something, but it's not that lean. It's not that that clear. That why are these analysis choices adapted and so on. And that's the other thing why I'm really and I are pushing on the theoretical contribution, that remember to think about that and really focus on that. I know that quite often people get really interested on the fact that we have so much data, on the fact that we have cool new methods that we haven't been learned in or haven't yet used in bachelor's or master's, and we got fascinated with those. I've at least been doing some steps like that, and I can from my experience say that usually those kind of projects end up in a shape where, how to put it nicely, even if you get something out, you might not be proud of that. And I've published stuff like that. I'm happy to say that I also force my students to read some stuff like that, just to make them aware of the danger of just doing something with these methods without really thinking through what is the research. And this is not for this particular thing. I just wanted to rant this out now before we let you go out and discuss a bit on the fact that why are we really speaking so much about the theoretical contribution with Akim, and why are we highlighting this? It is our hope and our wish that would really inform some of the methodological choices that we do and really nail that bit much stronger than it usually does with these papers.
Okay, cool. So shall we move on to our final presentation? The final presentation is cyber operations against Australia and attribution on Twitter.
Hello.
Hi.
Let me share my screen. Is it on?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So thank you so much. I'm not going to push to the limits of your patience as being the last solo presentation. So it will be a brief, I promise. I'm keeping time. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk about the most recent cyber operations to Australia and its relevance to the problem of attribution, which is basically about who did the cyber operation, who holds the smoking gun. And I'm going to present some exploratory findings, some initial thoughts on the issue with my newly acquired computational skills, thanks to SICSS, and they're pretty humble. So this is the outline of my presentation, and I will first give a background information about the problem of attribution. Then we will move on to Australian case, and I'll introduce my data, which is based on tweets, and I'm going to conclude with some takeaways. So the problem of attribution, this is a pretty neat definition, but it basically means the inherent difficulty of learning about the perpetrator of a cyber attack because of the difficulty of tracing cyber operations or lines of code to its source, and the ease of hiding your tracks when you make a cyber attack. And I'm going to mainly talk about the discussion Reed and Buchanan introduced in 2015 is the attributing cyber attack a science or an art? Because most of the literature nowadays deal with cyber operations, rightly so, or partly rightly, based on the technical elements of the issue. But I will argue that attribution has more to do with politics and with opinions about the issues rather than technical nuances. So this is Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison, and roughly a week ago, he organized a press conference and he said that the country, Australia, is under heavy cyber attack from very sophisticated actors, and every sector of the country is under attack, from the government sector, the private sector, healthcare, education, and critical infrastructure. And he said that they think it is a state actor, it's a nation state actor because of the scale of the attacks, the sophistication, the selection of the targets of the cyber attacks, and the tradecraft they use. But he shrinked from pointing fingers to any specific country, and he's specific that he's not going to make a public attribution right now, and he's not going to speculate. But what inspired this study is, when I was looking at my Twitter feed, I realized that people were talking about China. Although the Prime Minister or any other Australian government agency did not talk about China, they just talked about nation states, people were very quick to point fingers to China. So I collected some tweets, a little more than 70,000, a random sample of tweets from that day. And I cleaned these tweets and removed the stop words, and here are some results. So this is the frequency of tweets based on a keyword search on Australia and cyber. The first peak immediately after the press conference of the Prime Minister. Here we see a lot of people immediately start talking about Australia and cyber issues. And this smaller peak here is when China denied it. So we can see from this next chart, the frequency of tweets from that previous chart that specifically mentioned China is roughly about half of the tweets that was tweeted about the Australia and cyber. So like they weren't giving China a break. Immediately after the news of the attack, people started talking about China. And this second spike is where Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs denied they were behind the attack. And in the coming days, the discussions slowly died out. And this is the organic tweets, no retweets or replies on the issue. So what does this say about the problem of attribution? Like, why were people so ready to attribute this cyber attack to China? Well, this is the most frequent words from these tweets. As you can see, like the combined words of China and Chinese, like correspond almost half of the old tweets. They appear almost in half of the tweets they were sent on this issue. And like, these do not appear among the first 15 words, but like a lot of side issues related to China appear in tweets, such as India, with whom China had a border clash just a few days before the cyber attack, and COVID-19, which also has to do with the Australian decision to push for an international investigation of the initial outbreak of the coronavirus in Wuhan. So they were Australia basically was implying China was doing something hideous there. And people immediately started talking about these things and coercion and war without actually hearing from the government that China was behind the attack. So this is a word cloud from the hashtags. We can see from here is China is as big as cyber in Australia here. And in the hashtags, some perennial geopolitical issues appeared, such as the Uyghur question. These were people already mobilized for the Uyghur issue, and they took the chance to talk about China and the Uyghur matter. And then people were talking about India and Huawei. In the case of the Huawei, when you go into the specifics of the tweets, it is seen that people were questioning like how right was the decision to try to suppress Huawei. And there were some revenge-related hashtags such as boycott China, boycott Chinese products, and China must pay China, get out. And finally, there were like 4 or 5 COVID-related hashtags such as, and most of these were pejorative ones such as China virus, Chinese virus, and CCP, Chinese Communist Party virus. So in conclusion, what does this say about the problem of attribution? So in the tweets I analyzed, I didn't see a smoking gun, and people were not really obsessed about talking about the evidence of a Chinese finger behind the attacks, but they were pointing fingers to China anyway. So it shows that we don't really need forensic experts to make an attribution of a cyber attack, and public is very ready to make non-expert attribution. And this takes me to the bit that Buchanan was making in their 2015 piece. Attribution may be more of an art than a science, and like we don't need to necessarily go into the details of the technical analysis, but politics has primacy over the technological nuances there. And if people have reasons to believe that China is behind it, and politics will have primacy and suppress technical details. And especially if Australian government wanted to harness this wave and like say China was behind this and act on it, they could easily have done so in a similar fashion than how the Georgian and Estonian cyber attacks was immediately attributed to Russia. And so basically attribution in cyberspace, in our case, is what Twitter users make of it. One final takeaway is the tilt of the board. So meaning we cannot evaluate cyber incidents in isolation, and we cannot ignore the context. So context in this case was COVID-19, was India, and history of Chinese aggression in the region. And people brought pieces together and easily pointed finger to China based on these things. So context and politics might matter more than the technical issue of attributing a cyber attack. So this case was a limited research. So I think in future, if I decide to go on with the paper, I'll need to focus on the user profiles and which accounts were more influential than leading the wave of accusing China. And I attempted to do a sentiment analysis, but my results didn't make much sense because of the quality, or not quality, but the fit of the sentiment dictionary to the case at hand. If I can come up with a good dictionary, I think I can produce a better quality sentiment analysis. And thank you. This was it.
Great, thank you so much. I think this project needs to really go ahead. You know, Australian case, China, you know, can we use social media to better attribute, or is social media is just another way of false scapegoating? Because most of the time, a common problem we observe in cybersecurity is that, as you mentioned, attribution is difficult because you can easily fake attribution. Basically, you can write the code structure or apply tactics that are generally attributed to some, you know, usual suspects: Russia, Iran, China. But you don't have to be Russia, Iran, China to hack somebody just like Russians, Iranians, and Chinese do. So attribution problem is a huge issue. Can we solve this problem via social media? I'm still very much unconvinced, but I'm very much heartened by your study. I think this is a very difficult question to answer because social media, most of the time, in terms of attribution, gives like junk data. But if you can find a way to clear that And if you basically actually find something like a way to use social media in order to highly accurately predict the attribution of the perpetrator, then you can be one of the leading figures in the field. But it's going to take, I think, a lot more time. I mean, you have to look at Australia, other countries, and maybe 20 cases of cyber attacks across 5 countries, and in every single one test social media and retrospectively try to look at whether large groups are actually right, law of large groups or large wisdom of the crowds. You can test that. But it should take a lot more observations, a lot more cases. What does Mati say? Really interesting stuff. Moving forward from many classical Twitter studies focused on interactions. Also here the theory really nicely nails down the methods part of the work, i.e. focusing on attribution informs what to look from Twitter. Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting idea. And I wouldn't mind this project like failing 5 or 6 times because you're trying to do something very difficult. But I'm pretty sure you will start succeeding at 7th or 8th attempt, and you should really go for that 7th or 8th attempt. This has a lot of potential, but you have a lot of ground to cover, and I would really, really suggest you to. You're at American University, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I talked to Thomas Zaitsov there. He would get you in touch with a lot of people. Tell him that I said hi, but he's really one of those people.
I will.
You should, get in touch with. He doesn't do cyber, but he's one of the leading figures in conflict and social media analysis. You should really, benefit from him. So I think we have a last-minute addition as presentation. We have Kyle Betty. I thought he wasn't going to present, but I think he decided to present at the last minute. I think we can provide like 5 more minutes because we have to move on to the next session very quickly. So Kyle, if you're there, if you could quickly start the presentation, please. I think Kyle, oh yeah, okay. Cool. We can see it. You are muted though, we can't hear you.
Good, so
okay.
Yeah, I was just unclicking everything. Yeah, thanks. Anyways, yeah, hi everyone. How's it going? Hope you're all doing well. Everyone did a lot of really interesting work. I'm really interested to kind of read more about what you're going to do in the future. One thing that I was looking at, I'm probably the only one I didn't do a PowerPoint. I actually, I was encouraged to write this into R Markdown because I never used that before. And then I just rendered it into a PDF. So I'm just going to run through some of this for you guys. But basically, I'm looking at sentiment analysis of the word Venezuelan in Peruvian newspapers. This is some of the stuff I'm going to kind of discuss today. So what's the deal going on in Venezuela and Peru? So basically you have like millions of economic refugees. Actually, it's projected to be even more than Syria by the end of this year, who have left Venezuela because of the different problems that have occurred there. And basically they've been going to multiple other countries, particularly those throughout South America. And there's been different receptions of them by different people, as there usually is with migrant groups. So I first noticed this when I was actually living in Peru for a while. And just some of the things that I had heard people talk about, how I heard people talking about Venezuelans, how I heard the media discussing it. It reminded me of the way that Mexicans were talked about in California. And so I kind of made this connection. I listened to the news. I was like, oh, this might be something interesting in the future. There were a lot of signs up everywhere. I would take pictures where it was like, you know, only Peruvians for this job, no Venezuelans and things like this. So I thought, well, this might be something interesting to look at. So like last semester, basically I did my first kind of web scraping in kind of a crude manner before I learned the cool RVest method with you guys this summer. And basically I downloaded a whole lot of articles that I was able to gather. I did my own kind of analyses of it. I did some concordance plotting and other things like this to kind of look at different words. But I essentially chose those words myself. These words I just did out of my own kind of choosing. I'd never done a sentiment analysis before. So I thought, well, I want to go retouch this data again and do a bit of sentiment analysis. And so basically I'm going back over some of this data that I had gathered before. So I want to look at like what words appear to be positive and negative, and if they're similar to mine, and when exactly do they present themselves in the time period that I'm looking at. And then basically, is there any suggestion of difference in rhetoric between different newspapers that I'm looking at? Like, do some newspapers talk more favorably about Venezuelans and others talk more negatively? And then basically see if these results conflict or coincide with some of my previous results. So the main hypothesis is here. And my data sources were these 4 newspapers. These are 4 newspapers in Peru. They're of varying quality. So some are more kind of government kind of standard. Others are more commercial. Others are more kind of tabloidish. So I wanted to gather a range of different types of news media. What I had done previously is gathered about 1,400 different articles. And once I cleaned everything, I was down to maybe 1,200 or so to actually analyze. And that was a good thing to do. I did this first stage of analysis, like I mentioned last semester. And so right now I'm here, I'm doing this sentiment analysis. And this was really interesting to do for me. I'd never done sentiment analysis. And I know I left some of my code in here on purpose because, well, this is my first time learning R, so I wanted to show that I actually learned some amount of things. It's been a long process for me, but this has been really cool. I've liked it a lot. So some of the positive words, just the main thing to look at here is the N. So there's not a lot of them when you compare it here with negative words, which are in the hundreds. So the negative sentiment is really clear. There's a lot of words that are repeated. Crisis is probably one of the biggest ones, and that's one of the main things you heard also is the Venezuelan crisis, the economic crisis, etc. Looking at sentiment across newspapers and over time. So this is kind of interesting. Basically, it's really negative if it's below the gray line, and these are the 4 different newspapers. And so all these article publications, I mean, it's mostly negative coverage of Venezuelans that has been ongoing. And you can see it also in the proportion here of negative and positive, basically, news coverage. So that the negative just outweighs the amount of positive, and you can see it again over time, the same type of thing here. And it's really started around a certain period of time. And this is why I was looking at this, because I wanted to see where it coincides with multiple trends, one being migration and the other one being kind of media rhetoric and public polling. How does this affect basically the public's viewpoints on things? Again, anything to the left is negative coverage, anything to the right is positive. And so you can see the 4 different newspapers, again, overwhelmingly just negative coverage. Just a few different ways to look at these. I was playing with different plots and learning how to kind of look at all of this stuff. But I mean, overall, there's definitely a negative representation of Venezuelans in Peruvian news. And this translates into the society, I think. There was probably a difference between the newspapers that I'd like to look at more in the future. And doing this analysis was really an interesting thing because you got some predictions. So these are some of the different algorithms of predictions of where things might go in the future. So they actually are on an upward trend. This is an LM, and then this is the LOES. That basically they actually think they're on an upward trend, except maybe RPP, which could actually go more negative. But there's a potential that there's actually going to be newly positive kind of maybe coverage about Venezuelans. And this is due to multiple factors that are changing on the ground there, as well as policies that have been put in place at newspapers to not talk in a racist manner and things like this. So my major challenges was I'm new to R. This is my first time ever, and so the pre-SICSS actually time helped a lot because I was able to go through and kind of learn R a little bit beforehand, and then kind of look at what other people were doing, get some questions, and piece something together at least of some type of analysis. My time zone, the fact I'm way over in Canada made things a little bit of a challenge at times. I think for everyone. And doing this sentiment analysis in Spanish. This was something that was definitely a challenge and needs to be worked on. I noticed that this is a gap in the area of the literature, is developing better dictionaries for Spanish and other languages, I think. And overall, yeah, this was an awesome experience. I really appreciated everybody's help, and thanks a ton for everything.
All right, well, great to hear that. So this was really fascinating, discourses of the other, discourses of countries, you know, that are viewed as the other. So it's really interesting to see how social media discourses about people, about other countries, neighbors, non-neighbors change according to different political contestation periods. I mean, refugee influx periods, civil war periods, election periods, internal instability periods, all of their spillover. And especially for the government, social media provides very interesting and very useful new venue to test what their own people think and talk about regarding you know, other countries, neighboring people. So this, I'm really happy that we had this because I think this is the first. No, it's not the first, but I mean, in terms of geography, this study explores a new geography for us for Summer Institute Istanbul. So I'm also happy to see that, you know, our geographic horizon is also increasing. Okay, so the presentations are now done, and I think the only thing that is left for us to do is to celebrate. And one thing I would really request from everyone is that I will try to take a group screenshot if everyone can turn on their webcam and smile and wave when I say 1, 2, 3. I'm waiting for other people to turn on their webcams as well. If everyone can just like turn on Cansu, Martin, and everyone that we have here, if we can get like everyone to, I think Martin has gone, but it's okay. So on my 3 counts, we'll smile and wave at the camera. So 1, 2, and 3. All right, I will post this on Slack and also on Twitter. So Emre, what are we doing right now? To the breakout rooms and celebrate, or?
We are moving to after party and farewell. Yeah, but we don't have a DJ. Sorry for that.
Yeah, we don't have a DJ. Last year we didn't have a DJ as well. Last year we had cake, like lots of sugar, lots of cake, lots of coffee and tea. This year it's basically you bring your own cake. I'm sorry, we can't.
I bring my coffee from the kitchen, everyone.
Yeah, I'm drinking water basically, so it doesn't even show on my screen. But yeah, so how do we do it? I've never done a Zoom party. How do Zoom parties work?
I will.
Everyone can dance maybe in front of camera.
I will create breakout rooms, and as usual, we have breakout rooms. We will chat each other, and we will say goodbye to audiences. The after party is special to participants.
Oh, okay.
For coming our presentation session. Matti would like to say something about that.
Yeah, Matti? Is Matti gone?
Matti gone?
Either he got dropped.
I don't drop anyone, but
did Matti drop himself?
I think he said he has to go something else.
Oh, okay. So yeah, no, I'm pretty sure Matti can send you his regards later on. Actually,
we
Emre
have
can
as well. We can say hi to Onur Hocam.
Where is Onur Hoca? Ah, Onur Hoca, hello.
Hi everyone, I was just
Would like
about
to say something. You would like to add something?
Yeah,
You're welcome.
yeah, it was great to hear all of your presentation. I was really enjoyed. I mean, I wish I could like participate more, but this was all great.
Yeah, it was great having you too. We were really lucky. Yeah. Okay. So right now we go to party. I don't know what that look like, but yeah.
I will create breakout rooms now. But wait a minute for organization.
Okay, here's my party background.
Okay, I automatically create breakout rooms. I will create 5. Recreate automatically. And as you all are co-hosts now, you can move your room as you wish. And we have Adunni here, Nizi Onur Kuru as well. I made him a co-host as well. And yes.